This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Fire Committee. On our agenda today is a discussion on the recent inspections of the London Fire Brigade by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire Rescue Services, followed by a question and answer session with the London Fire Brigade and the Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service. Before we begin, we have a few small items of business. Please may I remind participants to silence your devices, your mobile phones. Members of the public may like to follow @London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag #AssemblyFire for this meeting. Now, can I ask our clerk, Diane Richards, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies for absence have been received today.
Okay, can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members, and can I also ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests in specific items listed on the agenda? Thank you. And can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of January 2025? Can we note the completed and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings of the committee and the additional correspondence received? Thank you. Right, now we're going to move on to our main item, a discussion on the recent inspections of the London Fire Brigade by His Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary and the Fire Rescue Services, followed by a question and answer session with the London Fire Brigade and the Deputy Mayor of Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service. I want to welcome our guests, His Majesty's Inspector Lee Freeman, KPM, His Majesty's Inspector at Constabulary and Fire Rescue Services, Jonathan Smith, Deputy Commissioner and Operational Director of Preparedness and Response, London Fire Brigade, Charlie Pugsley, Deputy Commissioner and Operational Director for Prevention, Protection and Policy for London Fire Brigade, and Jules Pipe, CBE, Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service. Thank you very much for coming today. We will be starting off with our first questions from me, and it's going to be for Lee to start off with. We're going to be focusing on the inspection report that you've done, and LFB have exited Engage a year ago now and achieved what you described as significant improvements in its inspection report published in November. In your assessment, what have been the key factors behind these improvements?
Thank you, and good morning. Absolutely articulated that there have been significant improvements. My predecessor, Matt Parr, you may recall, was sat here in 2022. I think he described and used the phrase that the London Fire Brigade was well led and poorly managed. I think the improvements would absolutely change that assessment. It is now effectively managed, and I think our report supports that. In answer to your question, in terms of some of the most important changes, it comes back to culture. We have seen a credible cultural change programme be resourced, governed effectively, tracked with outcomes, not just outputs. And we have seen, when we have gone across the organisation and spoken from the top right through to the firefighters and the staff who are delivering that operational and support services across the whole organisation, a real connection and a buy-in. And those changes articulated through the vision from the Commissioner in terms of the behaviours and the values and the why everybody comes to work, and what the expectations around the standards of behaviour that have been agreed and signed up to by the staff. What we have seen is a real shift that the staff told us they felt that that change was being done with them and not to them. So cultural change and the start of that change in culture and behaviour in the London Fire Brigade has underpinned the other improvements that are articulated in probably some of the more operational areas, but the culture change has probably been the most important and probably the most necessary as well, in light of historical findings and reports that have obviously raised real concerns around that. So we've also identified and shared across fire and rescue services nationally and identified that cultural change programme as evidence of innovative and good practice. So, you know, we've also utilised Andy Rowe and his team in sharing the experiences of how you begin to change culture, and we've used that as good practice in some national seminars to try and assist other fire services and indeed other public sector organisations that we oversee about actually how you can begin to land some of this, because it's not easy.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would thank you again also for coming today, because the process that we have here in the London Assembly is to scrutinise, and having you here is incredibly important. And so we are going to be putting some questions on this particular issue with you, and you've highlighted culture change, but this is also an area where there needs to be real improvement as well, particularly on training. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and some of the areas of maybe concern that you might have as well?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. This is a work in progress, and there has been significant progress made in the last 2 years by the team and everybody at London Fire Brigade. But we have highlighted some areas where there is still work to be done, as you would expect at this juncture. There's been an awful lot of resource and time put in place by the team focusing on getting the foundations right, which is, what does it feel like to work at London Fire Brigade, and is there a shared understanding and agreement by everybody who is employed or volunteers and engages with that service about the standards of behaviour that are expected. And we'll probably touch on later, also making sure that there is an environment and culture where people can speak up and feel safe to do so. We do highlight in the report there is still some work to be done to make sure that all the processes and systems that underpin what we felt was an emerging culture of people feeling safer to call things out was underpinned by the strong processes and systems and the resourcing of what has been a really important change for London Fire Brigade, which is their own dedicated professional standards unit as well. And certainly when complaints are being made, and they are now being made, and I'm sure the service will detail you more around some of the numbers around that, when people do call out allegations and concerns about perhaps how things are being done within the organisation, there is a clear way that the service and the brigade now responds to that in a way that, again, I think is quite leading nationally in relation to resourcing a professional standards unit where it actually is dedicated individuals investigating those complaints and providing a service to the people making the allegations, but also making sure that if those allegations are indeed unfounded, the people who are accused of those allegations can still resume their careers moving forward, because, of course, not every single allegation necessarily is going to meet the threshold where formal action is going to be taken. In answer to your direct bit about the training and stuff, we do highlight within our report there is some process and system stuff that still need to improve. What I would say, there's 11 AFIs that we issue within the latest report. 2 years ago, there were 44 AFIs. I think that's an indication of the improvements that have been made. I also think it's fair to say that the Commissioner's team have had to prioritise here. Resources are not infinite for them. So whilst we've highlighted some AFIs that say there's more work still to be done, they have been deliberate decisions, and there's nothing that we found in our report that London Fire Brigade didn't already know about and didn't have a plan which they could justify to us as to why there was still more work to be done. Mainly because some of the foundation work around leadership training and the cultural stuff has really focused their minds. And I think the final point I'd probably put into context would, there's 11 AFIs in this report, but there's also the same number of innovative and areas of good practice, 11 areas that we've cited that we think London Fire Brigade are worthy of highlighting as innovative practice or good practice to shared across the whole service nationally. When you look at that within the context of the 44 AFIs and the causes of concerns, and indeed going into engage at the last, it really has been a bit of a turnaround over the last 2 years, and which is why we've highlighted in my findings that this is a significant improvement for the brigade.
Great. I mean, we recognise the fact that there's still more to do, and there's no room for complacency, and it's important that There is a response to our LFB colleagues. In response to previous inspections, the LFB has prepared action plans. Will you produce an action plan to address the recommendations from this report?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair. And just to reflect, first of all, if I may, on some of the comments that Lee's made, I think it's probably worth referencing where we've come from. So Charlie and I have been involved in every HMI inspection since the HMI restarted their inspectorates of the Fire and Rescue Service back in 1819 and to obviously where we are now, having received the report that we did last year. And actually this has very much been a joint partnership with the HMI to now get us into this position. I think it's important to state that because there's no doubt at times the Inspectorate has presented back to us some very challenging findings about the organisation that we're responsible for managing, but actually that has really helped drive the improvements that Lee has just spoken to and we've spoken to in this committee before. And as the Commissioner has always been very clear to state, the reintroduction of the Inspectorate into the fire and rescue sector nationally has without doubt been one of the most innovative and impactful measures that has been taken in the recent history. I think thinking back to where we were after the 2002-2003 industrial dispute, where we stripped out quite a lot of national standards, a proper inspectorate that had any real meaning, we moved to peer review, which did have a role, but it was a critical friend role. It was not the same type of rigour that the Inspectorate put on organisations. Now, I think we have seen the benefit of that as the London Fire Brigade with the partnership with the HMI, that yes, that has been challenging at times. Yes, that's presented back real issues for us to face as an organisation. But as Charlie and I can sit here now and talk to this committee, talk to the broader GLA, assure the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor, and most importantly, Londoners, that London Fire Brigade is now in a much stronger position 6 years down the road from where we were in 1819. So that, I just wanted to set that context if I could, Chair. In terms of the areas that Lee's already highlighted, we know that we've got the 11 AFIs. We do have an action plan that we're working through. We know that there are particular areas around our people services structures that we still need to improve on, and we were very clear about that. We were very clear with the Inspectorate and their team when they came in that we know things around talent management, how we use our appraisal system, you know, that almost the employee life cycle of someone when they're thinking about a career in the London Fire Brigade all the way through until they, you know, reset their career and how they want to progress. We know we've still got an awful lot of work to do, which I'm sure we'll come on to in the second part of the panel. But the short answer to the question is that yes, we have an action plan. Yes, we will drive through those AFIs with the same vigour and thrust that we have done for the operational improvements that we've spoken about, because the last point I would say is that we cannot actually see the manifestation of this in instances like the Dagenham fire at the Spectrum building without getting the culture of the organisation into a much better position. The two are two sides of the same coin. You don't make operational improvements without really making progress on the culture of the organisation. And of course, culture is not a linear thing. There's no start and finish. I don't think we ever claim that we will fix, in inverted commas, the culture of the London Fire Brigade, because that's just not how this works. We employ human beings with all of their plus points and all of their foibles, and you never actually get to a start and finish position. But what you have to be is relentless in how we continue to improve the lived experience of everyone when they're working in the London Fire Brigade, because that's only then do we then see the outcome of that in our operational response, or indeed the work that Charlie's team do in the fire safety regulatory environment, or indeed in control, or any of our professional departments.
Can you just say whether the actual action plans that you've prepared, and just give me some explicit answer to that particular question?
Yes, so in terms of some of the key areas that are in there, so one of the points that was highlighted, you know, particularly around the requires improvement, is around our management and leadership offer, and that includes the training that's being delivered. So at the moment we have a significant leadership offer around the Frank Bailey, the Gillian Tallett and the Colin Townsley programmes that were rolled out over the course of the last 3 years. You know, over 3,500 of our staff have been through those leadership and management programmes, but they're currently being reviewed at the moment because we've also been looking at the NFCC's leadership offer, so at middle management and supervisory management level. So we're looking to see how we can bring those into a new leadership model working forward. We know that we need a development plan, that we need to be able to identify talent and bring that through the organisation. At the moment, we were very clear with the Inspectorate that at the moment we don't have a high potential scheme where we can genuinely identify talent and then bring them through the organisation. Only 2 years ago, we didn't even have an appraisal system. Now we do have an appraisal system, but the maturity of the organisation has still got to develop in that space. I think now we've got Sally as the Director of People Services as a permanent appointment, and the structure she's now putting in place. I think as we move forward over the next year to 18 months, all of those AFIs that have been identified by the HMI, actually we will work our way through, and we do have a systematic plan against all of that.
Right, we're going to be digging into this a lot deeper with our fellow colleagues here, but it's really important that we don't just hear the talk and that there is those clear actions and that we see it happening. I think it's incredibly important that those voices the firefighters have contacted us is reflected in the change that you're saying that is going to happen, and I hope that the inspector agrees with that the report reflects those voices, the need for the change that we need to see. You can come in, but I'd like to bring in Assembly Member Hall now as well.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. This is for you, Jules. The Mayor's response to the committee's comments following your confirmation hearing stated that you would hold the London Fire Brigade to account on progress made towards existing HMI recommendations, as well as any new recommendations that come out of the June inspection. How are you tracking progress on this?
That's done through the regular fire boards that we hold up monthly, and it's myself, it's the Fire Commissioner and his team and support staff, and we review all the key indicators.
So give us a clear, if you review some and some are sticking and not moving anywhere, what would you do to address that as Deputy Mayor?
Well, it's my job to hold them to account and question them what plans they have to address it, and use my judgment as to whether their response is credible. And all that's recorded and is in the public domain. So if you wanted to go through individual particular items, I mean, I can't obviously do that instantly.
Don't encourage me, Jules. Don't encourage me.
But it is there as a matter of record.
OK, thank you.
We're moving on to performance and developing leaders, and we're going to Assembly Member Cooper, this section.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to some of the points that Jonathan was touching on there, but I'm going to come to Lee first, if I may. You assess that the LFB is requiring improvement in the managing performance and developing leaders module in 3 specific areas. The brigade doesn't use performance and development reviews effectively. Promotion processes are fair. That section, and then also the brigade needs to do more to diversify its leadership. What actions would you expect to see in these areas over the next 12 to 18 months to demonstrate adequate progress is being made on those areas?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely correct in terms of the summary. And of course, we have our characteristics of good that we consistently measure what we should be seeing with every fire and rescue service in the country, which is why that particular area still requires improvement. Before I directly answer your question, I would like to put some of the requires improvement into context and as well, because I think the service has already mentioned that there's been a significant investment of resources in engaging and training leaders right across the whole organisation, often done directly by the Commissioner and his executive team face-to-face with those leaders, which is exactly what I would have expected as a key part of any cultural change programme. And I think probably as a consequence of that investment, we probably have seen some slippage in relation to the training around this particular area about actually how you begin to ensure that you actually still develop and look at high potential for your existing leaders. If there'd been an absence of the other progress, this would have been more concerning for me, in all honesty. But I do acknowledge that there's been a significant amount of investment put into changing culture and engaging with those leaders in other sorts of training. What I would expect to see, I'd expect to see the individual performance development system being able to be used to ensure that on an individual basis people understand their team objectives, how that links to their department and how that links to how the force is actually delivering its overall outcomes from an organisational perspective. At the moment, that's not that in place. So I'd need to see from the Human Resources, the People Services Department, which is still embryonic. That was a massive issue for the Fire Brigade 2 years ago in the previous report, which they have now got in place, but it is still pretty early days for People Services. The people who are appointed to head up those teams on behalf of the Commissioner, I'd expect them to make sure that that is embedded. And there is a culture of people being not only supported, but being held to account individually on a team basis, and a method by which the organisation can track performance to identify trends, and whether that's behaviour or performance aspects, can hold people to account for that. And you see that evidence, obviously, in terms of this process. I also want to say, and this is probably a statement that is applicable to every fire service in the country, that diversity through positive action around leadership. This is not unique to London Fire Brigade. It is a service-wide issue. But I think in terms of positive action leading to outcomes, we identify there's much more work to be done, both in terms of how the brigade recruits people from all communities, so everybody sees that as potentially an employer of choice. A key part of that, of course, is creating advocates within the service at the moment who are going to go back to their communities and talk about, actually, this is a great place to work because I can be myself, it's safe, I can speak up. And I think the brigade are on a journey with that already, which is a positive. But I do think in terms of developing leaders to create advocates, there's more work to be done. The promotion processes are fair, but I would expect the brigade over the next 2 years from our next inspection, when I come back in, I'd expect staff networks to be telling us that they're involved in promotion processes, that they have a voice in terms of identifying and being involved and picking leaders who exhibit the behaviours and a track record of behaviours, that they can say that we know that individual is not just coming to an interview process and talking about what they would do. We are involved and we can say their track record says that we know they're going to lead like that. And that's how you build confidence for me in terms of the promotion processes, and not just fair, but you have people from all communities who feel that they are going in and have a voice and can be developed. So that's the sort of stuff that I would expect to be seeing in relation to that, if that answers your question.
Thank you. So I'm going to come to Jonathan, I think, then, of you and Charlie. You've heard what Lee has just said. Is that your assessment of what the LFB needs to be doing to address these shortcomings that have been identified? And, I mean, I think one of the things that... I mean, I've been on this fire committee and its precursor, various sets of initials, LFIPA and so on and so forth, for 9 years now. And the diversity at the top end of the organisation is, if I say limited, I mean, apart from Danny, it's hard to think of other women who've progressed all the way through to higher echelons. I mean, you know, I spend time with, you know, yourselves, the Fire Commissioner, but also borough commanders, station commanders, senior firefighters. It still has a feeling of an organisation that needs to probably go on a bit more of a journey. It hasn't arrived at the destination of feeling comfortable, inclusive for everybody, and a place where that promotional opportunity is going to be completely open to everybody.
I think that's a completely fair assessment in terms of where we are. As Lee's already alluded to, this has been a sector-wide problem for a long time, and there are structural barriers. So one of the things we're working with the Fire Brigades Union on at the moment is looking to remove some of those structural barriers. So once you get to station officer level, for people to then progress into more senior positions, it is actually very difficult if you've got caring responsibilities, and actually that has a disproportionate impact on... Is
that because of shift responsibilities?
Well, and it's because of adherence to structures like the Grey Book, and so there's a number of IR-related issues that we do have to work through with the Fire Brigades Union to try and ensure that we're in a position where we've got flexibility in terms of our shift patterns, that actually where people have got caring responsibilities, and of course that that is equally applicable to men and women, that we're actually creating a modern 21st century fire and rescue service that's able to accommodate that. Because I do recognise, and the Commissioner does, and I think we all do at a senior level, that there is very much a glass ceiling at the moment, and some of that is structural. We need to unpick those structures, which we are doing with you, because I think, to be fair to the FBU, they do understand that there are structures there that do have a disproportionate impact on their members as well as our staff. So that is very much part of what we're doing at the moment around the action plan that Assemblyman Bakari was referring to. We've got a new leadership and management competency framework which is in draft at the moment, and we expect to see that at the end of April, which will really help set out some of the key findings of what the research that we've been doing over the course of the last 18 months. And where I really want us to get to is something akin to what the NPCC has. So if you're in the police and you're progressing your way through the organisation, it's very, very clear what you have to do to achieve a rank of sergeant, for example. So the College of Policing sets out very, very clearly what is required to be a sergeant, including going into infinite detail around the exams that you need to pass and all of what would be expected for you to reach that position. We don't have that equivalent in fire at the moment. So one of the things that we're very keen to support is the proposals around a college for fire and rescue, where there are these national standards that do take into account the flexibility that we need to have as a modern, forward-thinking sector, which then I think will help remove some of those barriers that unquestionably have stinted the ability at the most senior level of the organisation to see the diversity that we know that we need to have, because it's no secret that the highest performing organisations are those that have the most diverse. You see that in the private sector as well as the public sector, and we've still got a long way to go. Now, we are the most diverse fire and rescue service in the UK, but I have to say that is a very low bar. So we take zero comfort from that whatsoever.
I think we're going to come back to the figures on that, but yes, we have noticed.
So that is a very low bar, and we do know that is something we're going to have to put our shoulders to the wheel on over the course of the next 18 months, because Lee's team will be relentless, and this is where the real value of having the HMI is an additional layer of scrutiny, including that we get from this committee and, of course, our independent cultural advisory panel, who take a very keen interest in the demographic makeup of the London Fire Brigade. All of this is helping us to concentrate our efforts, to prioritise where we need to remove these barriers, and then I'm very confident that in the next months and years ahead you will see a much more diverse organisation at every level of the organisation. But it's something, again, the point I was making before, you have to be completely relentless about it, and you have to have a real focus from the strategic all the way through the organisation. And just my final point on promotions, everyone from DAC and above, so Deputy Assistant Commissioner and above, has to sit in front of a community panel, a stakeholder panel. You have to do a DEI assessment, and that's at every level of the organisation. So the organisational competence around DEI in particular has been building over the last few years, but we would all recognise there is still much work to do, but it's an absolute priority for us as an organisation moving forward. And I think the advantage of having a better HMI report now than we've had previously is that does give us a bit of space to take a much more strategic approach to the diversification of the workforce, and indeed addressing a number of the other AFIs that are in the report, because we can be much more strategic about it. We can be strategic about how we use outreach to get into communities, to encourage them that a career in the fire service is absolutely for them. I think historically in the past we've been quite tactical. We just haven't had the space to be able to take a bit of a step back and look at it from a much more strategic perspective, and that is something I'm very much looking forward to being able to do over the course of the next 18 months, because we're acutely aware that when the HMI come back in, they will have very, very clear expectations of what they want to see, and that's a good thing for us as an organisation.
Well, I think so, and we just heard that from Lee. So I'm going to turn to Jules now. You've heard from Lee, and now you've heard some of the commentary there from Jonathan. You know, how would you assess the steps that the LFB has taken so far, and what more it needs to do over the next 12 to 18 months? Are you feeling that things are in a good place in terms of moving forward? Obviously not there yet. Well,
there is a tremendous amount of work to be done, but I think what Londoners can take a huge amount of reassurance from is that the areas which HMI have found to be either good or outstanding are all those frontline operational, the frontline operational response to fire and rescue, and they really, you know, the team really are are to be commended for the leadership that they've shown to get.
Absolutely, and especially with the introduction of so much new kit that's taken place since Grenfell. And I think to come up with an outstanding result in terms of the major and multi sector incidents with all the new drones and 64-metre ladders and so on and so forth is very impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a mistake that certainly the service and the political leadership nationally, locally, citywide, made, I think, about the fire service in previous years, that I think people felt that, well, fire's fire, it doesn't change. Fire's been the same since the world was created and nothing moves on, whereas actually the truth is the threat, the new challenges that come along, it's ever evolving, and I think that's something that the service is definitely attuned to, and will continue to evolve as threats do, as the nature of the built environment changes, as the population changes, as some new bit of technology is discovered to have an inherent danger attached to it, and they will work with that. So that's the good news. The challenge ahead, actually, when you look at the 5 areas, the 4 of them that are adequate and 1 that requires improvement, actually, through my eyes, that they are essentially a real HR challenge. Because actually, even the protecting the public through fire regulation, an awful lot of that is about attracting and retaining those with the qualifications, fire engineers and so on, to be able to successfully deliver that part of the service. So whether it's recruitment and retention in that area, or whether it's all the areas we've just discussed in terms of getting the culture right, getting the diversity right, is really a human resources challenge. And so I'm very pleased that we've recently recruited the new director, who I think we're going to be hearing from in the second.
Yes, Sally's going to be joining us, I think, later on today, and I had the pleasure of meeting her yesterday at one of the 30, 40 and 50-year award ceremonies, which of course are full of the most amazing people receiving awards for long service, during the course of which they've done some incredible things. Chair, I'm going to leave it there because I think we've touched sufficiently on the other area, and we are going to come back to it. Thank you.
Assembly Member Toll.
Thank you, Chair. And this question is to Jonathan or Charlie, whoever feels best placed to answer. So in the previous inspections set out that some staff told the HMI that they think the promotion process are unfair. Staff described the process as inconsistent and said that the promotions were based on whether your face fitted. 53%, which was 577 out of 1,094 of respondents to the HMI survey, disagreed that the promotions process was fair. What progress has been made on this, and what have you done to gauge staff views on this?
No, thank you for the question. I think just to begin with, in terms of what the HMI have reported back, that actually the bulk of staff see the promotion process as being fair, and I think the independent assessment by the HMI has given us that reassurance. But promotion's a really, really important thing, and it's a very, very good measure of how people perceive the organisation and perceive senior leadership in particular, which is when myself and Charlie and the Commissioner and other senior officers sit down with watches and we go through, and promotion is always raised as an issue to talk through, and we go to great length to actually dispel some myths, the truth be told, because some of this is a cultural legacy from some bitter industrial disputes in the past, and that takes time to unpick that. I think where we are at the moment is we're being relentlessly open in terms of how our promotion processes work. We publicise when we're going to be doing particular promotion rounds for particular ranks. There's a lot of work that's done to encourage people to come forward, particularly those from underrepresented groups, because we do need to see that leadership coming through the organisation. Some of the biggest changes we've made is that both myself and Charlie had to go through a very rigorous process to get to the positions that we were in now, and that includes sitting in front of a watch. It includes sitting in front of a community stakeholder panel. It includes doing things like DEI assessments, and all of that is very clear and it's very robust and it's transparent. But some of that healthy scepticism, if I can put it that way, still exists, which is why when we do the staff survey, when we do things like pulse surveys, promotion is always one of those areas that we have to keep a relentless focus on. But it's going to take, we'll be quite honest, it's going to take some time for some of those cultural assumptions that were brought out of 15 years of very, very bitter industrial dispute, the truth be told. It takes time to unpick that. We have to live it. As the senior leaders in the organisation, we have to be ruthlessly transparent in terms of how we're promoting into those senior positions, and people need to see it and feel it. But it's one of those real cultural indicators of the organisation that once people have real faith in the promotion process, I think you then see other cultural improvements across the organisation. So there's been an awful lot of work that's been done. There's still work to do, because if people have still got that perception that the promotion process is unfair, then perception becomes reality, and we have to do something. We have to do something about it.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah, I know from my own time in the private sector about how important it can feel to, to feel like you've got a career path in front of you. The confidence in the promotion system has a huge impact on morale, motivation at work, and so forth. So can I just push that final point of my questioning about what specifically is being done to engage with staff about their views on this, so you can track whether or not their confidence is growing in the system?
So one of the biggest things we did was actually publicise in very early order when we're actually going to be running promotion rounds. So if you're a firefighter looking to progress to leading firefighter, you know exactly when that round is, you know exactly what's expected of you, you know exactly what qualifications you need to have achieved. Where we're trying to get to is that actually we upstream all of this, and this is where the appraisal system is really, really important, and we need to mature in that space. That actually, if you're someone who's been identified as potential leadership talent in the organisation, we're able to upskill you before you get anywhere near a promotion round. We do that investment before you get there. So the final interview, if you like, should be the cherry on the cake, because we've already invested in you as a leader coming through the organisation. We're just starting to do that. I think being really open and opening ourselves up for external scrutiny on our promotion round has also been really, really important. And as I say, the most senior levels of the organisation, we have people from outside of London Fire Brigade making judgments on who should be promoted in the organisation, and that's had a big impact. Staff see that, and that's had a really big impact. But there is still more for us to do. As I say, as long as that perception still persists in certain parts of the organisation that there is some inherent unfairness in the system, then we've got more work to do. But I think the external scrutiny that's brought to bear by the HMI, the challenge we get from this committee and the Cultural Advisory Panel as well, means it's something we have to keep coming back to. But I can see the progress, certainly over the last 2 to 3 years, in how we manage promotions going forward. And I would expect to see in the staff survey and the data indicators that we get back in that people will gain more and more confidence in the process going forward.
Thank you, and it's good to hear you being so welcoming of the scrutiny that we provide. Assembly Member Hall is going to be talking about areas for improvement.
Lee, if I could start with you. When will you follow up on the areas for improvement you have identified in the report?
We will obviously have button error there. We obviously have our next formal inspection, which will be in about 18 months when the field work starts. But of course we have a full-time team, some of them sat in this room today, who are constantly engaging and monitoring the performance of the brigade. We have the action plan which has been submitted in relation to the 11 AFIs that we will continue to do insight work in between now and the commencement of that formal inspection, and that will also include direct one-to-one conversations and meetings that I personally also have with the current Commissioner and whoever succeeds him in the coming months. One other thing I would say in relation to the requires improvement, which is around obviously that area of managing performance and leadership, it absolutely underpins, I think, everything that has been said in the last few minutes in relation to the importance of that investment and first-line supervisors and managers, particularly in relation to promotion processes being seen as fair by everybody. With the complete respect to any executive team and commissioner or chief fire officer around the country, the most important leaders in any organisation are first-line supervisors and managers. And until there is an effective performance development review system that absolutely is underpinned through honest, trusted conversations by those two first-line managers and supervisors at a local level, and it's their assessment and development of their own staff that leads to the identification of talent, that will never be fully completed. So it's positive that the brigade has invested so heavily in those initial conversations with the firefighters and fire staff who are in those 2 junior management positions. But if the brigade is going to kick on and really ensure that the cultural change kicks through into outcomes in relation to developing leaders and managing performance, that investment in those first-line supervisors and managers moving forward is absolutely critical. From that requires improvement grade to then be getting up into the characteristics of good. And I think that link is something that I'd really want to highlight to you, because that is a really important investment moving forward for the brigade in the next 18 months that we need to see.
Yep, thank you. And we're getting lots of nodding of heads, so I think the brigade agree with you there. Something you mentioned earlier, fairness. I mean, in any walk of life, people take things on the chin as long as they think it's fair. Have you done any looking at people that maybe have been suspended and what's happened to them and the fairness around any of that, or do you not go near that? Have you looked at what's happened to people that have maybe been accused of racism and that found guilty? Have you looked into any of that?
Well, firstly, on a sort of systematic basis, we obviously engage directly with the Fire Brigades Union, with the other representative bodies, with staff networks who represent those staff. So you'd be unsurprised to know that they are never shy in coming forward and highlighting to us, quite rightly, where there are concerns. There are also other avenues. We have firefighters and fire staff who contact us directly, and where we have concerns in relation to those, we will have an insight meeting with those on a one-to-one basis, and that is part of our inspection programme as well. And we will, if we think there are wider issues that are linked to something more systematic or concerning, either I will have a conversation with the relevant chief fire officer, or in the brigade's case in London, the commissioner, or we might even actually begin to then actually see whether or not through some further work that is an line of inquiry that we wish to follow up. So the answer to that is yes, and people are never shy, and no matter how a service wishes to manage us, we always get told what's really going on when we go and see the people operationally.
Yes, I know that, and I know, Jonathan, don't you? Because I've been involved with the Fire Brigade for very many years. And talking of which, and if I can go to Jonathan now, the Commissioner did say that, and he promised after the cultural review, that anyone found guilty of racism, sexism or bullying would be sacked. Do you have anybody that has been suspended and is still suspended on full pay?
So we do have a number at the moment. As we stand here at the moment, we've got 28 individuals who are currently suspended. Now, the committee will obviously forgive me. I can't go into specific details around those cases. But one of the things, and I think it was part of your previous question, Assembly Member Hall, is that we know that following the cultural review, and then we had to disestablish some of the functions that sat within the People Services Directorate, as it was known at the time, and then build back from there. The numbers of individuals who have been suspended, the number of cases across a whole range of different disciplinary issues has been significant. There's no doubt about that. I have been involved in the suspension of more firefighters, control officers and members of FRS staff than I ever thought I would when I joined this career. But that has been really, really important. How we deal, it's actually similar to the point around promotions, how we deal with misconduct, how we deal with discipline, how we make sure that we remove individuals from the organisation, if that is what's required, who don't share the values of the London Fire Brigade, is a real cultural indicator of where we are as an organisation, and that's been something that we've been quite relentless about over the last 2 to 3 years in particular, is where the establishment of the Professional Standards Unit has been a genuine game changer, and there's still work to be done with the PSU, as I'm sure we'll be coming on to, but that was a recommendation that had come from the HMI in one of their previous Spotlight reports. We've completely embraced that. I think now the PSU has been embedded over the last year. We're starting to see real progress, particularly around the speed of suspensions, the speed in which cases are coming to fruition, and then the speed with which there's a discernible outcome. Because that's the really, really important point, is making sure that we get to a position where there is an outcome, and not everyone will like that outcome, but there is an outcome nevertheless. Because I think if you look back, particularly around the historical case reviews that we've been working our way through over the last 3 to 4 years, that was one of the biggest issues. There was never actually an outcome to some of these cases. Now we are in that position, and I think the Professional Standards Unit needs to continue to develop and evolve, as it will do. It's still a sector first in its current guise, and we need to work that through. We've just appointed a new permanent head of the PSU. I think once all of those structures embed, that will then give us a real sense of where we need to go as an organisation.
Jonathan, I've been asking these questions for way over a year now, way over. Some of these people are on full pay and they're at home, so it's not representing on the one level value for money for anybody. It's not fair to the person if they're hanging on. It's also not fair to their colleagues around them that may know that they were racist, sexist, whatever, that actually they're sat at home being paid a full amount of money, and this still isn't resolved. So when do you think, I know I've asked this before, but when do you think this will be resolved? Because it's all the historic ones. I mean, if somebody has been found guilty 2 years ago and is still on full pay, I would look at that and say, I think that's unacceptable, unless you can tell me there are good reasons. But this isn't fair to anybody.
No, and I wouldn't disagree with any of that. Now, there are some of these cases are particularly complex and they're particularly difficult to resolve because there's some of it has got a legal element to it. There's obviously a lot of HR elements that sit around it, and then of course there's the role of representative bodies in terms of how we're able to move this all through. But the simple fact of the matter is we have had people who have been suspended for far too long and the outcome has taken far too long to get to. Completely accept that. I think what we're now starting to see with the Professional Standards Unit, particularly over the course of the last year, is that's happening much quicker now. So when we get allegations come in where a decision is taken to suspend someone, all the way through to when we get to the outcome, you are now seeing that happen a lot quicker than it was happening before. We're taking much more control back centrally because we were using CMP as an outsourced human resource function to deal with particularly some of our more difficult cases, and that was taking far too long.
Yeah.
We accept that. Now that it's come back into the PSU, we are now seeing genuine progress in the time it's taken from when the original allegation comes in to when there's a final outcome. Now, we are due to publish some of those findings now that we've got a year's worth of data that we'll obviously be able to present to this committee going forward, and you will see the trajectory of travel is in a much better position than it was, certainly in the aftermath of the Culture Review and certainly throughout 2023. But it is something we have to keep coming back to. The Commissioner has spoken to this point before. You know, we're not a regulated...
I know, because I keep asking it. I sound like a bloody parrot. I'm just repeating myself constantly. But 28 people, if this has been going on, I'm thinking of a particular case that's 2 years, over 2 years. Yeah. That isn't acceptable for anybody.
No, I completely agree.
But I keep being told it's not acceptable, but we're going on and on.
There are some, I mean, in some, obviously without going into the detail of particular cases, there are some where there are very, very complicated legal impediments to us to being able to progress those cases. One of the things we're lobbying quite heavily on, and it may well be something for this committee to take forward, is around fire and rescue being a regulated profession in the same way that policing is, and in healthcare and in education.
Yeah,
because I actually think that will really help us address some of these issues. At the moment, you know, we're subject to the same HR rules and regulations as other industries are, and actually, given what we do as a profession, I think there's a very strong... And I think if we move to that position, that would help resolve a lot of the very justifiable frustrations that I know that you've raised before.
I just fear that in a year's time I'll be asking the same questions. You'll be very irritated with me, as will colleagues, but it just has to stop. It's not fair.
I completely understand that. I think what you will see now that the PSU has been in place for the last year is a real shift in terms of the moment that the allegation is made all the way through to a final outcome is now much quicker than it was before, because we were in a difficult place after the Culture Review. There's no doubt about that.
So my last question on this: when do you think I'm going to stop asking these questions? I.e., when is it going to finish? Because I'll never stop asking these questions because it's wrong.
And I completely understand that, Assembly Member Hall. So I think over the course of the next year, now that we've got better structures in place within People Services, and Sally will be able to talk to this in the second part of the committee, having a permanent Director of People Services, having a permanent head of the PSU, having HR operations managers now in place is actually giving us a structure that gives us a fighting chance to move these processes through much quicker than we've had before. Because in the aftermath of the culture review, when we had the Jenny Simnett review of people services, essentially that directorate had to completely start again. And we've been building that back up over the course of the last 18 months. But of course, these cases have continued to progress whilst we've been building that structure back in. I think where we are now, with the PSU in position for over a year now, I think puts us in a much stronger position. Now, it will obviously be up to yourself, Assembly Member Hall, in terms of when you'll feel that you won't have to keep asking these questions. But I think it's...
I'll stop asking, Jonathan, when there is nobody that has been sat there for 2 years.
No,
having
that is
been
totally
found guilty, waiting for a response.
And that's totally unacceptable, and we need to be kept held to account on that. But I think you will see genuine progress on that over the course of the next year.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. Now, across the 4 areas rated as adequate, what steps will you be taking in the next 6 months to deliver the improvements recommended by the Inspectorate?
So in terms of the other areas, as we've already touched upon, a lot of these sit within the HR function. There's also a couple that sit in Charlie's world around fire safety regulation. But we have an action plan in place. We know that we need to do much more with the appraisal system. We know that we need to look at how we're developing training, in particular around management and leadership, and we've got plans in place to do that. The new competency framework for management and leadership programs, I think, is going to make a real difference there, that people really understand the requirements, particularly at a management and leadership level, taking that forward. There are other elements around the structure within people services that's also going to make a big difference. So actually having that leadership team in place who can then look at how we deliver a talent management system, how we identify potential, how we completely restructure outreach, how we make sure that we are going into all of London's communities. As I was touching on before, being able to take a much more strategic approach to all of those points is where this action plan is going to get us into a much stronger position around those 11 AFIs that the HMI have identified. And we'll be able to share in detail that action plan with this committee.
Yeah, no, and in fairness, you're very transparent and things have improved. So thank you for that. Briefly, Jules, I mean, I've got a question here that's more or less as it was before. How do you keep an eye on various things? But some of the areas for improvement that are identified, they're not new. So what extra emphasis are you going to put on the ones that aren't new, the ones that are reoccurring, that you really need to get to grips with? What are you going to do that's different? Your microphone.
I'd probably have to ask you for some specifics, but then I'm in danger of having to hand over to colleagues, because if you were saying that the response is the same, then I wouldn't have an answer for you. But I think that although some of the issues might be recurring, as you've heard from the leadership of the LFB, new leadership has come in the form of the HR director. New leadership has come in with the appointment of the head of the PSU. New training, new programmes are being applied to perhaps, yes, some long-standing problems, but that's what I'm challenging the team on in my meetings and seeking reassurance that it's having an impact, whether the movement in figures is incremental and challenging them to how much farther and faster they can go throughout the year. So I think I'd ask you to be a bit more specific in the question.
Well, no, all right. So if in your head you keep thinking, oh, I've seen this issue before, this issue is reoccurring. I mean, you could take my previous questions, but I don't think Jonathan wants to go there anymore. But I mean, you could think, right, we've got 28 people being suspended. I'm only using this one as an example. How can I help? How can I go to government? Now it's a Labour government. How can I go there and see if we can actually change the way things are? What are you thinking? You know, in Debona, think, if you can't go over it, go round it. What are you thinking that you can do to help change some of the things that keep cropping up as being an issue? Well,
I mean, my role is to support as well as to challenge, but I can't support in terms of management. That's not my role. So, and as I've attempted to outline, I think there have been a lot of management changes, both in approach and also recruitment, to address the issues. I mean, and remember, for me, it isn't a second time around on the times that I've seen these. These are this last 6 months, the first time that I've considered these challenges. And I have been satisfied in my questioning of the team that they are addressing it through the resources they apply and the recruitment that they've undertaken, the processes and policies that they have in place. Where the one thing I can support them with is helping strengthen their arm in the ask for more resources.
Well, exactly. There's always something you can do as deputy mayor.
And I do that both. Way. You know, the mayor has stepped in with more resources in this recent budget round, and then both the mayor, myself, and others within the GLA make the case across the board for more resources for fire services, both in terms of the operational side, for training, and also crucially for the regulatory side as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're going to go very quickly to Assembly Member Polanski and then Assembly Member Turrell.
I'll be very brief. Thank you and good morning. I want to return to suspensions, I'm afraid, very briefly. I'm more just looking for information that you've probably told me before, so I'm going to apologise in advance. It's about the process. So a suspension under investigation in terms of the bar for a suspension, how is that bar decided? Is that reviewed? And who makes that decision? Is it internally with the fire brigade and then referred to the PSU, or is it the PSU have the set standards and they decide what goes in investigation as opposed to gross misconduct or not suspension?
So the way it works now that we've got the professional standards unit up and running, is an allegation will come in, the PSU will look at that, they will triage that to understand what the allegation is and what potential action needs to be taken. And they will take a professional decision on whether or not this is something that then needs to be considered for suspension. Now, the decision to suspend is a deputy commissioner decision, so it comes to myself or it comes to Charlie. What the PSU do is they will take HR advice, and just as importantly, they'll take legal advice in terms of what, and it obviously depends on what the nature of the allegation is. But the PSU will then complete a suspension risk assessment, and this has been a really, really important additional tool in our armoury in how we manage suspensions going forward. Is there's a very robust suspension risk assessment process once the allegation comes in. The PSU will take a decision with legal advice and with HR advice on whether or not it's hit a threshold around gross misconduct. If it has hit that threshold, that suspension risk assessment is then completed. It will then come to my office or Charlie's office. We will then read it through. We will again take additional advice to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And then if the decision to suspend is the right one, we will then take that decision and sign that off.
That's really helpful. So my final question is, the nature of the allegation really pinged out to me. Obviously, you can't have criteria for every single allegation that might ever have, but is there very set criteria or previous examples? So when you're making that decision, you're able to go, this isn't about the personality or any relationship to them. This is a clear black and white case of this.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is if there's any legal issues, or if there's allegations of criminal activity, that obviously hits a bar that's very straightforward to deal with. We've taken decisions around bullying, harassment and discrimination that actually the chances are that will always be a stage 3 hearing, and a very, very good, not in every case, but a very, very good chance the suspension would be the most appropriate course of action. But what the suspension risk assessment does enable us to do, actually going back to the point that Assembly Member Hall makes around value for money, is that if we do suspend somebody, we do know that they're then not actually adding any value to the organisation. And there are other alternative options in light duties pools or in other parts where we can take a risk-assessed approach and actually say, well, look, suspension in this case won't be appropriate, but they do need to be removed from their immediate workplace. But actually we can find them something else to do whilst the case is being investigated to get us into that position. We're now much better at doing that than we were 2 years ago, where, if I'm honest, a lot of the time the default position would have been to suspend, because when you looked at the risk to the organisation, that was the appropriate action to take. We're now much more sophisticated and intelligent in terms of how we do that, and that's been an evolution over the course of the last 18 months.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, a very quick one from me to you, Jonathan. In response to Assemblymember Hall, you mentioned the ambition of the fire brigade becoming, or the fire service, becoming a regulated body like the police are. And we've heard this again from the Commissioner on numerous occasions, that that's an ambition he has. you compared it to the Met Police, and obviously we've seen some very high-profile cases in the Met Police, and indeed a recent court case that actually shows that being a regulatory body isn't actually addressing the underlying issues there with some of the recruit, or being able to get or being able to get some of the less desirable people who have entered with into the service out of the service. So I just wondered if you could reassure us, in light of that court case, that this will actually make a difference, and it won't just be it won't just become a bureaucratic nightmare to recruitment.
No, that's an excellent point, and I think the regulatory element to this is not the silver bullet. It's just an additional tool in the armoury that we would have available. And yes, I'm sure the Met Commissioner would have a very clear view in terms of the frustrations that he's had, as this committee will be aware of. But if I look at other like-minded professions like the NHS or in teaching, I think you can see an alternative route for fire and rescue that actually brings the best parts of being a regulated industry, but not necessarily following exactly the model that policing has gone down. And there are obviously reasons, there's differences between our legal responsibilities versus the police, but it's not the silver bullet. I make no bones about that. But I do think when you weigh up all of the evidence and actually my ability to be even more transparent with yourselves in terms of dismissals and suspensions and getting into some of that detail, it would unquestionably help with that. And I think that's no bad thing, but it is not a silver bullet by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you. Lee, I just wanted to quickly ask you a question on the specific focus that you'll be putting on PSU in your next review in 18 months' time. What are you going to be specifically looking for in terms of investment in the PSU?
Thank you. So, coming back to outcomes here, I think you've all touched on, and clearly there's a lot of understanding here about the implications of, firstly, if you don't have a PSU, who does the investigations? Well, who does the investigations are often middle to senior managers who have got a full-time job, which explains historically why some of the delays, albeit with the legal issues that sometimes bog these things down, you sometimes have 2-3 year investigations because the people who are conducting them are actually not experts in that field of work, and they're sat across legal representation who are, and secondly, they've got a daytime job as well to do on top of that. And thirdly, the levels of trust inside the organisation around the objectivity and confidentiality, when these are line managers who might have relationships that go back many years involving people who are engaged either as an accuser or indeed of somebody who is being accused, really causes problems. What we will be looking for when we go back in around that is around how is it contributing to a culture of high trust, high support and high challenge, firstly. Do staff networks, Fire Brigade Union, other staff representative bodies, even when they don't like the outcome, feel it was a fair process, it was transparent and it was done professionally? When people are exonerated, because some people will be innocent until proven guilty, is it being done in an expeditious and fair way that they feel they can come back and work within that organisation again? And I think actually the investment that's been made by London Fire Brigade is capable of achieving all of those if that department is working really well. And the final point would be around the culture. You can't see values, you can only see behaviours. So is the behaviours and the reputation of the Professional Standards Unit enhancing the cultural change programme, or is it inhibiting it? It has to enhance it by the way that they operate, and it has to enhance it by building trust amongst everybody within the organisation, that if you put your hand up and say, I've got a problem, you are not going to be victimised as a result. But even if you are accused of doing something, even though that might be very difficult, you feel that you've had a fair hearing. It's that level of connection to the culture and the leadership stuff, which I think comes back to the requires improvement, that we will be looking to knit together and see how it's working.
Yeah, I'm really pleased you talked about trust, because I think this is a running theme when it comes to particularly the complaints procedure and the PSU specifically, but also independence. Would you say that that was an area that you'll be looking into to make sure it's truly an independent process as well?
It's got to be objective, it's got to be professional. I'm not sure independence in the true word is completely possible, because it is part of London Fire Brigade and it is against our own standards of behaviour. So not independent in the sense of sat here as an independent inspector, but I do know what you mean in terms of creating that trust. Yeah, absolutely. Along with the people services, the human resources investment, those two are absolutely fundamental to ensuring that the improvements that have been very impressive in the last 2 years now act as a foundation in order for the brigade to kick on to move towards being good and outstanding across the board, which I'm sure you'd all agree the communities in London would want that and actually do deserve to have a fire brigade that is probably rated the best in the country. I know that has been the ambition of Andy.
Absolutely.
I think the foundations are there to do that, but of course talk is cheap. It's now making sure that the impetus is now realised moving forward over the next 18 months.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution. That was a really interesting section. We are going to move on to the last part of the questions on this for this particular panel with Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you for that, Chair. Lee, my first question is to you. In February, you wrote to the Fire Minister and explained to her that the 3 GTI Phase 2 recommendations directed at the HMI had been addressed through your inspection of the LFB. Were you satisfied that the LFB had made adequate progress in each of those 3 areas?
Thank you. The short answer to that is yes. We looked at that during our inspection and we were satisfied with that. Equally, obviously, in terms of Phase 1, the 29 recommendations have also been reported as completed as well. What I would say here is when we have an insight into an organisation, we have a sense and an assessment of how effective that organisation is at delivering action plans. Action plans actually don't deliver anything now, they do strategy. It's people, it's leadership and its impact. One thing that I think gives us confidence and I think should give you confidence is that over the last 18 months there is a track record that has emerged under the leadership of the current Commissioner which needs to continue moving forward of actually delivering results and outcomes as a result of those action plans. So the answer to that is yes, we are. Of course, we have our own recommendations as well in relation to that, along with a number of other bodies and agencies. But certainly, yes, we are satisfied that that progress has been made.
That's fine. And will you continue to monitor those 3 areas?
Yes, absolutely, we will. And of course, we will be going back formally and revisit, and I won't reiterate my answer around the insight and the engagement that my London team has ongoing with the brigade, which will continue.
Okay, thank you for that. And just coming on to you, Jules, what conversations or what work have you and the Mayor done with Lee to reassure yourselves that these areas identified in the GTI Phase 2 report have been addressed satisfactorily by the LFB?
We've had a dedicated session with of the Fire Board with the leadership team going through the recommendations. And I mean, obviously, I think virtually every Fire Board probably we're looking at HMI and GTI recommendations, but we have had particular focus on the HMI recommendations.
That's fine. And you're satisfied with the progress they've made? Fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this particular section, and we're having a very small change to the panel, so I suggest we only have a very short break of 5 minutes. But Lee, can I say thank you very much for coming to our committee today. I think it's your first Assembly Scrutiny Committee meeting that you've attended, and we really appreciate it. Having the scrutiny from us and yourselves, I think, makes all the difference, as Jonathan was saying, and we do want the London Fire Brigade to be the fire brigade that we are incredibly proud of, to continue doing that amazing service they do, and having that service from yourself coming here today, bringing in your knowledge and your experience and your next steps has been really, really useful for our meeting. So thank you very, very much for coming. Okay, we'll be moving on to our next session in about 5 minutes' time. Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome back to the Fire Committee, and thank you to our guests from the LFB and the Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service who have stayed with us for the question and answer session. We now welcome Sally Hopper, who is the Director for People, London Fire Brigade, and who has joined us for this section. Thank you very much for coming today. However, before we start the questions, Charlie and Jonathan, the committee would like to express, unfortunately, our disappointment in the length of time it has taken the brigade to respond to some of the commitments made to provide information during our meetings this year. We're still awaiting 9 responses. Can we ask that these are provided by the end of the month, and for a renewed commitment to respond more quickly and transparently moving forward? Now, the committee does have the right to summons documents, but we would very much prefer not to go down that route.
No, of course, Chair, and apologies that that's happened. I can only give a corporate apology on our behalf. That's unacceptable. We've always prided ourselves on submitting documentation when it's been required, and we need to make sure we do that. So if you're able to send the detail through directly to our office, we'll make sure that we deal with that straight away.
Okay, I mean, as you've been saying, you are open and transparent, and as I've been saying, we need to see action. And we've been hearing a lot of words, but we need that action in place for us to do our job. And it is, as I said, very disappointing that we've had to wait so long. Now we are moving on to our next set of questions, and team, we do need to make sure that Charlie gets some time to speak as well, because you're here, you've been sitting quietly there for a while now, so we'll make sure that you're definitely included in the next set of questions. We are going to be my first set of questions is on training, so I'm going to go to you, Jules, first. Have you reviewed the training evaluation framework with the LFB? And are you satisfied that the LFB are now on the right processes in place to assess the effectiveness of its training?
Yes, it's one of the areas that we've considered at the Fire Board, and the proposals outlined to me are credible, and going forward it will be something that we'll be holding them to account on and judging them by.
What specific conversations have you had that you focused on specifically on training? What areas?
It's across the board. It's characterised by all the... It's shaped by, obviously, what's come out of the Grenfell recommendations and the HMI recommendations, and it's all within the CRMP as a framework through which we work through all the range of areas.
Have you been visiting any Pacific training sessions? Have you seen it firsthand?
Not training sessions, but obviously I undertake visits and meet with staff, whether it's on the operational side, or recently I met with the whole team that provides sort of the emotional resilience support to staff as well. So, it's I meet with staff across the board.
I mean, one of the things that we talked about before about your role is that obviously you've got a larger amount of work to do now, and that the role that you have here with the London Fire Brigade does mean that there is more activities for you to monitor. Would that be something that you're going to focus on a little bit more going forward? Because I think seeing it in practice makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, within the limits that time allows.
And prioritising can also help. Okay. We'll move on to the LFB. Part of the restructuring of the People Services Directorate has involved introducing a new organisational learning and professional development. How does the LFB assure itself that this has improved the training offer?
Well, thank you for the question. I think in terms of the sheer scale of new training that we've delivered over the course of the last 3 to 4 years in particular has been unprecedented in LFB's history. A lot of that, as the Deputy Mayor has already alluded to, was learnings that arose from the Grenfell Tower inquiry and the fire itself. So if we look at high-rise fire survival guidance, massive in emergency evacuation. There's been a wholesale sweep of training that's been delivered right across the board, from the control room to our incident commanders to all of our frontline firefighters. On top of that, you've got the biggest rollout of marauding terrorist attack training in UK Fire and Rescue Service history. That now means we've got a marauding terrorist attack capability on every single one of our pumping appliances, which of course means our firefighters are safer, and it means the level of service we can deliver in a particular high threat environment, which we know we will face at some stage in London going forward, unfortunately, is now far better than it ever was actually singled out for specific praise in the recent HMI report. You then look at what we've delivered across wildfire, and funny enough, this week we've just received our 4 wildfire vehicles for this summer, and we've rolled out a whole sweep of training that was a result of the learnings from the 2022 wildfires that London was subjected to when we had firefighters operating in 40-degree heat. Overlay that with new and emerging technologies, lithium-ion batteries, and making sure that our firefighters are prepared to deal with all of that. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the most complicated built environment in Western Europe. And the only way that we can assure ourselves and assure this committee and assure the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor and Londoners more broadly that we're on top of all of that is through our training offer. So a huge investment. That's come with over £20 million worth of investment from the GLA and the Mayor, which we're incredibly grateful for. But there's still an awful lot more for us to do, because when I get asked what keeps me up at night, our ability to keep pace with the changing and evolving nature of risk in a complicated, genuinely global city like London is absolutely up there, because it's very difficult, and we're seeing risk evolve almost on a monthly basis in terms of the challenges that we expect firefighters to deal with now. And the only way that we can give ourselves a fighting chance to be able to meet that risk is through the quality of the training offer. So then that leads to the assurance of the training that's provided. So of course a lot of our centrally delivered training is delivered by Babcock. And one of the things we've done within our Learning and Professional Development Department is be a much better client, the truth be told, to make sure that what Babcock are delivering meets our expectations. So if you look at the modern firefighting that we're now delivering, so we're currently halfway through training all of our frontline firefighters and officers in tactical ventilation, fire behaviour, the use of positive pressure ventilation fans. This is going on at the Fire Service College at the moment, so for the first time in over a decade, we're actually putting firefighters through real fire training scenarios. I've been down there myself, had a play in the hot house myself, even put a set on, so just to feel like I haven't completely forgotten how to do it. But actually, if you look at the levels of training that's being delivered there and how our firefighters are responding to that quality training, we've not had a single do not attend. So we've not had a single DNA, and considering that we're sending our crews 2.5 hours down the road, down into the Cotswolds to the Fire Service College, that's quite extraordinary. And that talks to the quality of the training that's being delivered. You know, we went out and we've got the very best fire behaviour instructors in the country to deliver the training to London firefighters down at the college, and we're halfway through that. We've got another year to go. That is going to give us additional tactical options on the fire ground in London that we simply didn't have 2 years before. So the sheer scale of what we've delivered over the course of the last 3 to 4 years is unprecedented, and that has been backed with resort. To be fair to the Mayor and the GLA and obviously your support from this committee, that has now put us in a much stronger position, because as Lee was referring to, we absolutely should be the best fire and rescue service in the country. We've got the most complex risk environment. You know, 65 to 70% of the high-rise buildings sit within the M25. We have a very, very difficult and challenging operating environment, and it's only right that the training that we provide is at its level best. And we have assurance functions in place now. So we're pulling together a new training assurance team. They've started off with our FFD officer, how we train our recruit firefighters. That is now being properly assured. That's going to move on to all of these other training interventions that I've just referred to. We use something called the Kirkpatrick assurance model, which essentially checks how the learner is receiving that learning, and then most importantly what the outcome of that is. That through my Assistant Commissioner Keely Foster, who reports directly into me. She's been working that model through. So we've got the assurance, we've got a sheer weight of training offer now for London firefighters that we just simply didn't have 5 years ago, but that reflects the nature of the challenge that we currently face. But that will remain an ongoing priority for the organisation, because the relentless way that risk continues to evolve in the 21st century is going to be a challenge for all of the emergency services, particularly in London.
Assemblymember Hall is going to be asking more questions about these emerging fire risks, but I do want to ask about a completely different area of risk that may start happening within our city. And, are you providing training for certain, risks that could be impacted by international issues? I don't want to go specific here, but there are areas of terrorism, etc., that we are now talking about on the news. It's becoming more and more apparent that there are emerging risks even in that area. Is that something that you've been considering?
Oh, very, very much so. So the change that we made to our marauding terrorist attack capability is not specifically just for that type of event. It's also much broader, across a broad range of threats and risks that we now face, because what you have now is the confluence of hostile state actors who have operated in London, and we've been on the receiving end of that. That's now in the public domain, so there's nothing new there. And the confluence of aggressive state actors with homegrown terrorists and single actors is still a significant risk for us as the London Fire Brigade. We have an annual assessment of risk that we keep recalibrating. If you look at the posture of the UK military at the moment, given what's going on, global events internationally, which I'm sure is what you're referring to, Chair, that has an impact on us as a genuine global city. When you see conflict in the Middle East, when you see conflict on the edges of Europe in Ukraine, that has a direct impact on London when it comes to wide area protests that we've seen consistently over the course of recent weekends. That causes us an operational challenge that we have to work our way through. But we also know there's been a hostile and aggressive state intent within the capital that we have had to respond to. So we plan and prepare for that. It was one of the reasons we put that investment into that capability. And again, when the HMI looked at our major incident and multi-agency capability, was rated outstanding. Moving from requires improvement to outstanding as a direct result of us looking at the risk profile that we're having to manage on a daily basis and making sure we put the investment and commitment into it. So we're as secure as we can be that we have a capability that can deliver the threats that we face. But I think, going back to my previous point, how quickly this continues to evolve is something we have to be relentless about, and it's a constant sense of discussion for us at a very senior level in the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an area that I want to really discuss or go down too much, but it essentially, without the army, you're the next stop, really, and to be prepared for that is quite a daunting task.
So I think that's a really, really important point. I think our role in civil defence is something that's going to have to evolve going forward, because you're absolutely right. If you look at the military posture now, they're quite rightly thinking about what they're going to deal with externally. When it comes to civil defence, if you look at our role during the COVID pandemic, when we were helping to support the NHS in particular, I think that's something we're going to have to come back to, and we're having discussions with the Fire Brigades Union in terms of how we can have something that's on a firmer footing, that should we require boots on the ground outside of the military, really the Fire and Rescue Service is the only one that can put those numbers of boots with properly trained firefighters on the ground in a short space of time. I think our role in civil defence is something that's going to continue to evolve moving forward, which I'd be very supportive of, because I think we do have an offer there without a doubt.
Well, I could go even further, but I'm going to stop there. And Assemblymember Hall, you have some further questions as well on training.
I do, and I'm so thrilled that you've actually got a proper firehouse for new recruits in particular to go into, because years gone by there were so many fires, they got a lot of practice on the ground. But now, thank God, because fires have reduced so much, they don't. Although, quite frankly, Jonathan, the thought of playing around in one is not my idea of fun, but I'm glad you got to do that. Do you think that you've got the capacity and resources to rapidly respond to training needs for emergency risks?
So the short answer is yes, and I think we've demonstrated that over the course of the last 2 years in particular. That I think one of the right criticisms that was levelled against us was our lack of agility and ability to move at pace to deal with new and emerging risks. I think what I've just been discussing around marauding terrorist attack in particular shows that where we do have that concerted effort, and that's working in partnership with the Fire Brigades Union in particular, which, to give them immense credit, we're able to have very, very sensible conversations about how the LFB is going to continue to evolve moving forward, that actually we can move this forward. We've got a much better relationship with Babcock now than we've ever had, and credit to Assistant Commissioner Keely Foster and the relationship she's built with Babcock means that they will move at a quicker pace than perhaps they did before. And I think we're just a better client, if I'm honest, Assemblymember Hall, in articulating very, very clearly what our ask is and then be able to move. But am I always conscious that we could move quicker? I think that's absolutely true. I think there's still areas where we could be more agile, but I think in terms of the short answer to your question, yes, I'm satisfied that we're in the right position at the moment.
Good. One of the emergent issues for the Fire and Rescue Service in the UK is having to deal with fires involving lithium-ion batteries. Do you think that the Fire Brigade are able to keep up with the increasing demands on that particular issue?
So I'll probably draw Charlie in here because this is very much his area of expertise. So Charlie, I'll hand over to you on that one.
Thank you. So first of all, I think we've got to recognise that nobody internationally has got a solution for this at the moment, and this is something that part of our active learning is really focused on. Where can we, from international fire departments or other areas, where can we learn from? But what we have done in the interim is we've got our specialist officers who deal with hazardous materials have had additional training support so they can support crews. We've put out various briefings to crews about the hazards. We've got online inputs, even very short bite-sized inputs from experts in the field just to raise the awareness. But what we can't do, for example, is there's not a silver bullet for it. We have to keep working with stakeholders, be it the government or whoever else, to try and actually proactively keep an eye on and making sure there's the shortest possible path from when we do have clear outcomes to delivering that to our staff.
Yeah, I mean, I was very concerned. It was reported last week that union representatives stormed out of a meeting with Transport for London because they were so infuriated with its refusal to ban e-bikes from the tube. And that was following an incident at Raynlands Lane station, which saw an e-bike explode on a platform shortly before it would have been taken on board a Metline train. Now, that concerns all of us, because when they go, they just go, don't they? Now, if that had gone on the Met Line and then gone underground and then you get that explosion, it's very, very serious. Have you been involved? I mean, have you been in touch with the union, TfL union, or the London Fire Brigade? Are you involved with those discussions? Because I'm pretty sure most people would not want those bikes anywhere near the underground.
Yes, so it wouldn't be right for me to speak for TfL, but there are partial bans already in place, for particularly on the underground network. We are in regular contact, both at operational level with our teams, as well as quarterly meetings that John, myself and the Commissioner attend, where we do raise these issues and challenge the risk assessments that are being conducted. I am expecting an outcome from TfL very shortly in terms of because the risk is, if you like, live. So it's not a static position, so you may need to have more control measures, and then maybe you may need less if the technology gets better, if you get better accreditation, safer products. So yes, the short answer is we are in contact. We are continuously highlighting the risks. But just as a bit of a background, something that I know we've spoken to this committee about previously is just the challenge in terms of the data as well that supports that. Because the Warwickshire Manufacturing Group research commissioned by government was over, I think it was about 1.5 years before it was published. So there has been a shortage of data in that space, which is part of the reason why we're being very much on the front foot of trying to take a holistic view that A, we'll work with TfL, but B, we also have to make our communities aware of what the risk is as well.
Yeah. Jules, can you not interfere with this a bit? Because TfL obviously is underneath the Mayor as well. I mean, literally, if that bike had blown up, and that's what they do from what I gather, they literally blow up in the underground. We are looking at a very, very serious event. Is there any way you can intervene on behalf of the Fire Brigade?
I entirely agree with you about how serious it is and how horrific they are when they do go off. My understanding so far, as Charlie had said, it's entirely risk-based, and I think I'm right in saying that that bikes have been left out of a complete ban because generally they have been more. They're more likely to be manufactured as electric bikes and therefore less susceptible to being, rogue batteries used with a a third-party charger. So, and so the focus has been on very much the sort of unicycles, the electric unicycles, the electric scooters, which obviously have less provenance and certainty about manufacture and standards. But I think if there is a reason to expand that risk analysis to encompass more things, such as all bikes, I would have sympathy with that. But I'm not qualified to make that judgment. And if it, whilst it remains a risk-based judgment, it's got to be a synthesis of what the brigade and TfL think.
Yeah, but we know that when they go, they blow up. You only need one to do that, to blow up in the underground. And we are all in serious trouble. Now, you, with your links to the mayor, could ask for pressure to be put on until we are absolutely sure that these things are safe, which we know they're not, because one's just blown up at Rayners Lane. Shouldn't we actually put pressure on TfL? Clearly their unions aren't happy because they stormed out of a meeting with TfL. You're the only link between the fire brigade, if you like, and the mayor and TfL. I would think most people, it's no good us saying in a month or so's time, yeah, it blew up, but, you know, I wasn't qualified to say.
With respect, I'm not the only link.
Can you put your mic on?
Obviously, I'm not the only link. I mean, there is a lot of dialogue going on and continues to go on between the fire brigade and TfL. I mean, certainly after this meeting, I will be asking actually where those, because it's not my role obviously to ask questions in this meeting, but afterwards I will be asking Charlie actually where those discussions have got to, because clearly the fire brigade would have put the challenge to TfL. I'm not saying in the same terms as you have, but they certainly would have put to TfL the dangers and the seriousness of what happens in those instances. So I'll be interested in learning from Charlie actually what the current position of TfL, what their response is to that.
Yeah, I'm asking you to short-circuit that on the basis that this could be very, very serious, very, very dangerous, cause loss of life, and somebody's got to take this by the neck and deal with it. Charlie.
To add to that, I can give part of that answer now, is that we have very recently had a meeting where that was the subject of part of it at a strategic level, and then it's just about looking at what processes are going to be put in place, because TfL needs to own their risk assessment. So I would be highly surprised if within the next few weeks there wasn't an outcome from those discussions.
Well, let's hope it's as soon as possible, because every day is a risk day. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Charlie, on that specific issue, so as you both know, Jonathan, I raised it with you about the need for the public awareness on e-bikes years ago, and I'm really pleased that we've now got the Charge Safe campaign, which is award-winning, which has, you know, done great work. But Charlie, we need to go further on this, and I requested a meeting with TfL. That's not happened between yourselves and TfL to make this a wider issue, a more public awareness issue within TfL itself. So there are things that we could be doing, with TfL to raise the profile of this issue, to make sure that your Charge Safe campaign has even a bigger impact. And if we were even literally giving out leaflets with your Charge Safe campaign at the stations, when you see somebody with a bike, that is going to make a difference. It may even save a life. We could be doing so much more. I'd really like to get that meeting set up. So let's make sure that that happens.
Chair, if I may, happy to take that away from our side as an action. I would actually note that part of our borough risk management plan, we actually have seen some really good work by crews around things like transport hubs, not just the gig economy sites, but a range of activity according to where the need is. And as I say, certainly happy to pick up away from here, because I'm aware as well that TfL, and obviously you have raised it very clearly, are looking about those communications campaigns as well. I do think it's worth noting that I suspect we're going to see a shift in London, but nationally there is, again, across the transport infrastructure, there is no other measure that's been put in place, and the partial ban and the ban on bicycles through key parts of the, if you like, the commuting period that's already in place in TfL is arguably ahead of others. Now, you cannot take that as that's good enough, because it's, you've made your points very clearly, which I think are absolutely fair. But it is challenging in terms of just recognising that, again, nationally, the transport infrastructure there is nothing else there that you can point to that really shows good best practice, where you can then say, well, why aren't you doing what, this transport hub does, for example?
And I know that Assembly Member Clark as well has been talking about this, the need for regulation, and the government just needs to get on with this. It's getting to a point where we've been saying it again and again and again and again. And how many more people need to die, quite frankly? This is just not good enough.
Okay, can I come back on that, Chair? Because again, the energy and passion that we as a service have put into that. We have got the Product Safety and Metrology Bill going through, and it's going through if you like, the first stage, and we're looking particularly around the second stage. I think through the work we've done with various peers and others, we've actually seen a couple of concessions actually added to the bill. So, for example, coming back to the committee's earlier point about being able to react to quickly emerging trends, giving it so you don't have to go down a completely long pathway. And as you know, obviously, our long-standing concern about online marketplaces, because all products are not created equally, but you can't blame the community who just, wants to either get about or do their work as best they can of trying to find a good value product. So hopefully it gives you a sense of, while we absolutely invite and expect the challenge you're giving us, we are active across a range of, from the operational through John's teams at fire stations, through our fire safety work. We were the only service to actually bring out guidance for building owners on just thinking about your risk assessments, which is now being expanded, and the Home Office and others are picking up. So more to be done. Welcome the challenge, we'll take the action away, but I would like to just note that we are still working very hard across the spectrum to address this.
Thank you, Charlie. You know that how passionate we are about this particular issue, and we will continue raising it. Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan, could I ask you about wildfires? So I think in July 2024 you spoke to a committee, I think in fact it was to me, and you said, I'm pleased where we are but not yet satisfied, and there is more we need to do going forward. Could I ask what progress has been made since then?
No, thank you for the question. So, yeah, really apt, actually, that's being asked now, because we've just received 4 of our wildfire vehicles into service that are going to be strategically placed right across the capital. There'll be at Biggin Hill, Enfield, Feltham and Walthamstow, so that we've got that geographical coverage. And as we've discussed before, this is one of the areas where, as an organisation, we've had to really learn from others, because historically we've been set up, for understandable reasons, to deal with urban firefighting, of which we have a significant capability. The events of 2022 actually just put us into a completely different operating space, and sadly it's something that we know we're going to have to continue to come back to. So we've rolled out a whole level of training across wildfire since 2022, backed up with kit and equipment that we now carry. The most notable example of that is the 4 wildfire vehicles that are currently going out. They're currently being fitted with all the necessary kit and equipment, and then they'll be rolled out. But the crews have already been trained, so they'll be able to receive those, and then we'll have those for the next 6 months until we get to the end of September, because we don't completely know yet quite how the summer is going to play out, but we're preparing for every eventuality. So we're much better prepared than we were. On top of that, we've got water bowser provision now, so we've got 2 8,000-litre water bowsers that we've also got available that we can deploy to scenes should we find ourselves dealing with the type of wildfire that we faced in 2022. But again, it's one of these things we have to keep being relentless about, because again, the nature of wildfire continues to evolve. You only have to look at what happened in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, where actually the Los Angeles Fire Department is probably one of the best prepared wildfire fire departments in the whole of the world, still found itself dealing with something that was on an unprecedented scale. And we have to reflect on that, and we have to continue to develop. So I think we're in a better position, but again, it's one that we're restless about, to make sure that we're looking at what other services in the UK are doing, what other learning we can take internationally, so that we are as best prepared as we possibly can be for what may or may not happen over the course of the next 6 months.
It sounds like really good and important progress. Is it Operation Welbeck? I forget the name, where different fire services help out other services.
Willowbeck, yeah.
Willowbeck, sorry. Yeah. Presumably in the event of wildfires, though, there could be other regions that are having similar problems on the same day with that heat. Would that water bowser be enough in terms of, would we be having to loan things out and things? I don't even know particularly what a water bowser is. So
yeah, so what we do have is national resilience structures. So we're part of the national resilience arrangements, which, as the name suggests, is a national capability. So we have national resilience assets that are provided by what was the Home Office and will now be moving to MHCLG. That's things like high volume pumps, it's our urban search and rescue capability, mass decontamination, that type of capability. Now that can always be deployed nationally. So if our home county services in particular were struggling and actually it wasn't impacting on London, then we were able to provide that level of support. The challenge we faced in 2022 was that 6 home counties fire and rescue services also declared a major incident for exactly the same reasons that we were faced. So actually those national resilience capabilities that we would draw upon from other services weren't available, and we had to take the decision to prioritise our own resource within London, because at one point we were dealing with 15 significant incidents spread right across the geography of the capital, which is something we'd never seen before. So our usual mutual aid arrangements, the 13-16 arrangements and our national resilience arrangements, we had to pause so that we could prioritise our resources to deal with the situation that we faced in London. But that's in many ways the unique challenge we now face, that if you've got a particular challenge in London, of course it's very likely that that will also be impacting on our home county services, who we would have drawn additional support in, but they weren't able to provide that. So you then bring resources in from further afield. So you never run out as such, because we would just bring resources from further away, but obviously there'd be a travel distance that they would have to travel before they were able to be deployed into London, which is why we're concentrating on our own internal capability to give us the best chance that should we face that type of event, which we know we will going forward, we're in the best possible position to be self-reliant and self-sufficient and not rely on those national resilience arrangements that currently exist.
Understood. Thank you.
Sorry,
Charlie.
Yeah, if I could just add, it's also really important we work with partners, because the urban-rural interface, you know, I think one of the early things that alleged to have happened from the fires in America was just about forestry management. Yeah. And while we don't have quite the same forest in terms of around London, you know, notwithstanding Epping and sites like that, I think we've both talked to, and certainly John's team, again, at local level, looking to, where possible, work with partners, and we have to do it collectively in a way that we actually manage and minimise the risk as best as we can.
Thank you very much. Sally, if I can move to you, I'm going to change the topic. First of all, welcome to the committee. I want to return to diversifying the workforce, which obviously we started with in the last panel. You're fairly new to London Fire Brigade, but what have you done since you arrived in terms of diversifying the workforce, or what steps have you taken towards that goal?
Thank you, and thank you for the warm welcome this morning. Good morning, everyone. And since joining in January, I've been getting familiar with the diversity, the composition of the workforce and what our ambition is. I've also been looking at how do we attract our staff, and looking nationally, making sure that we play our part in making the fire profession a profession of choice. And I think there's some important work going on nationally to help us with that. So the College of Fire, and also the career pathways that we've talked about earlier today. When it comes to how we advertise our jobs, I think we've done some good work in the outreach space before I got here. I think there's more to do. So I'm very pleased that I'm getting permission and approval to bring in a head of resourcing. It is subject to consultation at the moment, but that's something that we are looking to bring in. And that post will have a priority to not just do the very big transactional part of recruitment, because of the number of people we recruit every year, but also look at where are we in the jobs market. Could we do more, for example, with the Department for Work and Pensions advertisement site, job centres? Could we do more to use our community groups? We already use our community forums well, but could we do more? And really to have that presence in the market, that people come in and feel that it is a career of choice, that they can really come in and have those promotion pathways. I think there's something there also about moving away from any stigma it might have. So we could have some of our community with protected characteristics who may not see it a career of choice because of some of the reputation that surrounds the industry. So it's really important for me that we've had the improvements with the culture review, that we can start to hopefully move that conversation to a positive place. I think then when we come to the work that I've been focusing on as well, I've been looking at what positive action we can take. So HMI have mentioned that in their report. And what can we do to understand what are the barriers before you ever even consider a career in fire? And once you get here, what are the barriers or imbalances in anything that we do so that we can do what we can to work through those and hopefully bring about that more diverse workforce. I do believe key, though, is that psychological safety, and it's very important that when we bring colleagues in from the very first start that they know that if they speak out, so from their training experience right through to the people I was with yesterday who were getting their 30-year service award, that if they speak out, their voice will be heard and appropriate action will be taken. So I think we're very much on a journey with that. Some really good work has been done, and I just want to play my part in my new role to continue that work and build on that.
Great, thank you. And in terms of the next 12 months, so if you're in the committee in a year's time, what sort of metrics or what sort of steps do you intend to take in the next 12 months?
So we've already set ourselves some composition of the workforce targets, and we've exceeded one, which is LGBTQ+, but the others, disability, ethnicity, and those ones we haven't yet met, so we're slightly below where we want to be on that. So I'd like to think that in a year's time we have met those. It's not just about the metrics, though, but that is one measure, obviously, of how we will measure whether we're making progress or not. I would also like in a year's time to be able to more confidently see the work of the outreach scheme. So we have an outreach scheme, and again, I don't want to misrecognise anyone because there's some good work being done in that space, but I think there's more we could do. So I'd like to think that if you were in London and beyond London, you knew how to apply to be a firefighter. It's not always as clear as it could be. So I think our community that we're here to serve see that they know where to go to apply. It's not always as clear, it could be clearer. So I'd like to think that if people do want to use this as a career of choice, that it's more accessible and they know where to go to apply would be a simple metric, but an important one. And I would also like to think that we continue to improve in our cultural journey around people feeling that they can speak out and that they will be heard, because I think that is an important retention tool, and it's also important for our well-being of our workforce.
Thank you. And finally, so you mentioned protected characteristics there. You talked particularly about ethnicity and disability. If I take disability just for today, what plans do you have to make the workforce more accessible for disabled people?
So I'm really pleased to see upon arrival that we have got the entry of disability confident. I think there's more we could do to go further with that accreditation. I think that gives us a really good framework to work with. I also think that it's education, because sometimes people who wish to work will say it's harder when the statistics back this up in my profession. If you have a disability, it's harder to both enter the workplace and stay in the workplace. There are lots of barriers that are there for those with a disability. So for me, it's education. It's encouraging colleagues who have got lived experience of a disability, either firsthand or as a carer, to be given the opportunity to share what that means and what we can all do to learn and be our best selves when we're working together. I also think that the disability focus that we have to have is that it's really trying to let colleagues know that the promotion is there for them as well. We spoke about promotion this morning, and I think letting them know that they can come in and progress, whatever your protected characteristics are, is really important to me.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor, turning to you, obviously this was one of the areas of improvement that was identified in the inspectorate. What do you intend to do to support this work and diversify the workforce?
Well, in common with the committee, and particularly the chair, who regularly asks questions about this area through MQs, it's all of us are. It's almost a web of accountability that's being created to challenge as well as support the team to make progress on these areas. As Sally has said, the only one that has met the target is the LGBTQ plus T plus figure. There's still, I think, it's a percentage point or so, isn't it, in both in both gender, ethnicity, and disability. It's about a percentage point off, but they are relatively low targets. I mean, the target for women in the profession is 20%, I think, off the top of my head, and so it's probably about time, as we hit these, getting close to hitting these targets, we review realistically what they should be set at. I think one thing that I don't think has been said that will help us, though, is that in the recent staff survey, there's been a 10 percentage point shift in the percentage of staff who'd recommend LFB as a place to work. It's gone from 54 to 64%, from 23 to 24. So that is certainly a positive that will help the brigade sell it as a good place to work to all Londoners. And
thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you said, Sally, more to be done. We'll be moving on to Assemblymember Cooper now.
The screen's gone dead. We'll find another one that is working. Yes, so Sally, actually, I'm going to come back to you. So it's the point, actually, about stretching targets. The population of London is 61.4 ethnic minority. We have a great selection of people who live here. I'm going to say it's roughly 50-50 male and female. The KPIs are really low. The latest figures I've got for who's in the brigade are the 2022-23 figures. 23.2% of firefighters are from black and ethnic minority backgrounds, and 18.2 are women. I mean, I don't think the targets that the brigade has set itself are very stretching here, and they're nothing like the background population of London. So, slightly more stretching targets, do you think?
I think that you make a very valid point, and it's not lost on any of us that the community of London is more diverse than is representative in our workforce. And it does matter because we want to serve that community the best we can, and having a diverse workforce helps us to understand, for all the good reasons I'm sure everyone will understand. I think in terms of the fire profession nationally, it is underrepresented in a number of protected characteristics, and it is something that nationally has been a conversation throughout my career. I think
it is, but as Jonathan very eloquently pointed out earlier on, it's a very low bar to say that the London Fire Brigade is better than all of the other brigades nationally, because they're all dreadful, so we're slightly less dreadful. I don't really think is an argument that the chair will accept. I certainly won't accept, and I doubt if any of the other members of the committee will accept. So maybe we can go a bit further with the targets.
I think it's a fair challenge, and I think it's something we should take away and consider.
Okay, and earlier on this morning I was actually asking the questions about moving people through the brigade and making sure that we're meeting that challenge at all levels in the brigade. One of the things that the National Fire Chiefs Council has been looking at is a direct entry scheme for station managers. Now, I have views about this, but of my own, both positive and negative. But at the moment, the LFB is not planning to take part in that scheme. Why is that? What's the assessment of that scheme, and why not now?
Yeah. So I think that the career pathways that we're focusing on, so we've been focusing on, in my time certainly, the feedback that we received from Her Majesty's Inspectorate, which said that we could be clearer in London Fire Brigade about our progression pathways and our promotion pathways. So we have been focusing on how do we show up when we consider those really important points. How does one come into the London Fire and progress? And is that clear enough to any member of staff, regardless of what job they're doing, whether you are in the fire service or whether you're supporting in the office? Is it clear enough? When it comes to the national frameworks, of course we pay attention to those. There's some really good quality work being done in that space, and we don't want to reinvent things. When it comes to the actual station that you're referring to, direct entry scheme, I think it's something that if as we make sense of all of that, it becomes the right thing to do, then of course we would pay attention to it. But at the moment, I think we've got quite a lot of work to do to sort out our own promotion pathways and make sure they're as transparent as we all want them to be.
So, His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and the Fire and Rescue Service said that the direct entry scheme would help with recruitment from a wider pool of candidates with a broader set of backgrounds, skills and experiences. I mean, I'm sort of thinking, you know, what's not to like about that? So what other action are you taking to increase the diversity of the intake and beyond that scheme?
Thank you. And I think it is something that we will absolutely consider, and it would be wise to keep that under review as we are trying to do the very aim of having a more diverse workforce. So it's definitely something we will consider, and in my early days I will keep under review.
Okay, well, I think that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough because you are very new into the post, but I think as a committee we are very likely to also want to keep it under review as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I am picking up a lot from the panel today about that appreciation of the fair challenge that we are putting across to you, but it's action that we are looking for, and that is what we will be expecting. So I do hope that that is taken on board. Assembly Member Hall.
Well, I'd like to say I think you're doing really well. You're not that far off those targets. The big question for me, Jonathan, is do you feel everybody's got an equal opportunity to join the brigade? Because that, to me, is the most important thing.
So I think as Sally's touched upon, I think once you've established that the London Fire Brigade is a career for you, I think then the answer to that is yes. I think the question we have to keep asking ourselves is, are we asking in the right places? And are we actually going into the communities in the way that we really should be and being as proactive as we can be? Because I think it is a very fair challenge that I suspect a number of Londoners don't yet see the London Fire Brigade as a career of choice, and actually there is an obligation on us to be able to go out there and look at the widest pool of talent available to bring them into the organisation. So I think some of the points around being very, very clear about how people can access the London Fire Brigade as a career of choice, actually thinking that the London Fire Brigade offers a career, and that's not just in terms of frontline firefighting either. That'll be around our control and mobilising function, that actually there's a career there, or in one of our professional departments within the FRS. But I think there is a much bigger question around the outreach programme, which is why I'm really pleased around where Sally is going to focus, because I think that's where we have to take the brigade into those communities so that they can understand that the London Fire Brigade is a career of choice, because we will be a better service for it. But in terms of once people have made that decision that it is a career, then yes, there is that equality of opportunity across the board, and we want to see that talent come through.
And then organically it will work anyway, because at the moment we've got so many fathers and sons, or fathers and daughters in the brigade, or we certainly did the last time I was doing all my rounds.
There are quite a lot of family members in the
there are. Which, although when you go and talk to them in the mess, they're all moaning about the job, they then bring all their family in. So I wouldn't take my children anywhere that I wasn't happy with. And I think as more people come from different backgrounds, then that will work organically as well, as long as they're happy when we're in it. But I think sometimes there's been obsessions to get women as firefighters, and we have to face one fact. Nobody is saying we need far more male nurses. Women tend to want to go into that sort of profession more, and men tend to want to go and put out fires more. You've only got to look at your children. My son tried to set fire to the house once, accidentally, but nevertheless, because he was playing with matches, whereas my daughter leant towards different things. I mean, we have to accept that as well. Forcing issues sometimes, I think it is very wrong. But before I get myself into real trouble, I'd better be quiet. I just feel very strongly sometimes that we look at these KPIs and think we've got to do this and got to do this. We've just got to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to join the brigade. And I was very interested, Sally, to hear that you say it's not so obvious as how to join, and that, of course, I'm amazed about that, and I'm thrilled you're looking into that. Before I get myself in more trouble, I will be quiet. But I think you know where I come from.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of initiatives in many careers, teaching, that I'm in, that my profession, where we've been pushing for more men to be involved with primary education. I think this is a ambition for many public sector professions. So I think we're not doing anything different from any other group, and I think we should continue to push for equality and fairness within the LFB. And Clark, Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come to you, Sally, but this might be more generally for the LFB. I'm really interested in cadets generally, and my sort of broader question is why cadets look so much different than those who then go on to join the fire brigade. But I'm just wondering, Sally, so there's a 12-month recruitment pilot for the cadets and voluntary cadet instructors. How's that going, and how are the metrics? What are the metrics like for assessing the program?
So I will defer to my colleagues to come in on that, on the actual metrics, because I don't have that information. What I would say about the cadets is I did spend some time as the head of HR in the Scout Association some years ago, so I see the value of and the influence of those teenage years can have on people's career choices, and also the positive impact it can have on their well-being and mental health to have that sense of a group. So there's lots of community benefits by running the very many cadet programs we do so successfully, and I've seen some really good reports in my short time here on that. I do think, however, there is something more we can explore around how do we take them from cadets to a career of choice. So there's always more work we can do in that space. And then when we do that, I think there's also something there around them feeling that they're not repeating some of the things that they've already learnt, because keeping their attention and enthusiasm and retaining them will be really important. But if I may, if my colleagues have that figure, if not, we can provide that to you outside of this meeting.
So we don't have a figure because we've only just gone through governance with it. I mean, we're privileged to have many cadets come through into a variety of both operational and enabling teams as well. But this, as you know, is something new that we've tried to formalise, and part of that is looking for all the skills, the values, behaviours that they've already demonstrated. So how can we remove some of those barriers that would be normally part of, quite rightly, I think, part of the recruitment process, to make sure that we do have people with the right values, etc., and the right skills. So I think that's something that we'll be looking forward to sharing with the committee over the coming year.
I think it's something we'd like to explore further as well. I recognise there's going to be a change in chairing but in the coming year, but I do think it's something that the committee has had interest in the past, and I think will continue to do so. So thank you for that. Do you want me to... I'm just going to carry on, but I'm going to change the topic into fire safety challenges, and I'll start with you, Jules. Should all high-rise buildings be required to have evacuation lifts as set out in the London Plan?
All new buildings that require, that meet the requirements for them, yes, should absolutely have them, yeah.
But I mean, outside of that, so I mean, I guess the broader question is, have you had conversations with government about that? Because obviously we need legislative change across the country in terms of those evacuation lifts. Because while they're in the London Plan, I don't think that there's legislation across the country that provides for that.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely welcome national legislation that insisted on it, and I would welcome a whole revision of, as I've said many times, of building regulations that lifted the requirement for planning to start asking for these things, as we have done in the London Plan and the previous London Plan, when it's not really the province of planning. We need to get regulation right in this country, and I would much rather building regs fully and comprehensively deal with this and leave planners just to get on with planning, because planners are not qualified to make these judgments. That's why, you know, we make certain, you know, there are certain requirements, and for example, the requirement to demonstrate that the building meets the you know, highest standards of fire safety, but that is a requirement that the evidence is put forward, but planners don't take a judgment on the evidence. It's kind of requiring the evidence to be made available at the earliest possible time, but planners can't and aren't qualified to take that judgment. So there's a whole variety of areas, not just staircases, in which I think this country needs to get the fire regs and all building regs correct and have the right body doing the right job.
No, I'm agreeing with you. It just feels awfully like we end up putting things in the London plan because we want them in the London plan. We want safe buildings, we want a safe city, and that's the right thing to do. But it is still that disjoint where we need the lever
the mayor has on the built environment,
but we need
and
that
we don't have any levers on building control.
Yeah. But we need that national legislation, and in London, I think we're lucky to have that lever. But it does feel like it's. I won't make too much of a point, but it does feel that it's the country as a whole could be made safer because we've made London safer.
I mean, we are currently trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with the new British standard as well, which is requiring additional evacuation lifts along with the second core. So we're trying to work out what this all amounts to in the morass that is the building regulations as well as the British standards. And then you've got the building safety regulator and so, yeah.
And I know I'm going to head back to the chair because Assembly Member Turrell has more on this. Assembly Member Turrell.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm going back to the cadets on this. My supplementary is on the cadets, which is how will the success of the cadets be measured to ensure it's a worthwhile investment? Because I'm a former Army cadet myself, so I really appreciate the importance of the cadets and the cadet programme. I think so. It's important that we know how this programme is succeeding.
Thank you. So I think work in progress, and the key things that we need to be looking at is the quality assurance of the retention. So how many times do they turn up and do they stay? We hope they do, and we hope they get excited and want, as I say, to look at it as a career of choice. I think there's also something there around if we're able to, and it's appropriate to look at the diversity of the cadets, looking at that, but the retention levels as well will be important. And I think it's also going to be important for us to monitor closely any safeguarding and responsibilities we have as well. So it's all of those things to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have a really good experience for the young people, but also make it something that they want to tell their friends to join as well. And I think those sorts of things will help us to do that.
Thank you for that answer, Sally. And coming over to you next, Jules, which is, have you had any discussion with the current government about evacuation guidelines for fire and rescue services?
No, I haven't, but colleagues have in Housing Land, and through Tom Copley, the Deputy Mayor for Housing, will have done.
Thank you. And can I just say at this point, I really do appreciate the fact that both the Deputy Mayor for Housing and Fire have been meeting regularly with me as Chair, and I do hope that continues on, because that dynamic, as you've just mentioned, is an occurring theme within the work that we do, particularly with building safety, and having that joint approach is really important.
Thank you. And just so that I want to make sure that I've answered correctly, I mean, I was referenced to PEEPs, yeah? Yeah, that has happened.
Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sally, if I can return to you, this is about the professional standards unit. So the recruitment to head of the PSU, what are the key criteria for the role and how is that recruitment going?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share an update on the head of the professional standards unit. So when I joined in January, this was one of the first things I did, was to secure a permanent head of PSU. I'm very grateful to a number of staff and also members that helped with that selection process. So we had the interviews on the 28th of February and we successfully appointed, and the new head of PSU will be starting on the 7th of April. I'm unable to share their name this morning simply because they're still going through the vetting process, but they are due to start on the 7th of April. In terms of what we'll be looking for, so members will be aware that the PSU became a year old just as I joined, And we've learned much from that, and colleagues have been very generous at sharing those learnings with me in my new role. What we looked for ostensibly is obviously someone with the absolute highest levels of integrity and our values. How did we measure that? Through, we had a DEI assessment, as the Deputy Commissioner has mentioned earlier, for our recruitment. We also had a stakeholder panel, and we also had an interview with, I was very pleased that Martin Ford sat on that panel and helped me with that decision-making process, and our General Counsel and also the interim head of PSU made up the panel. So it was a rigorous process. We attracted a good few candidates to the job. We got down to interviewing 5 candidates, and then we chose our selected candidate. We were looking for a year in somebody who has good, solid experience of employee relations and employment law. The reason that's important is so the earlier questioning that the panel made around suspension risk assessments, making the right, having some dilemmas come your way, because sometimes things aren't always straightforward, and being able to use their practical judgment and their experience to make the right next moves. So that they were very much high criteria factors for whoever was going to be our new head of PSU. So we have got a good outcome there, and I'm really pleased that that person will be joining us, and they come with a lot of experience in April.
Thanks, Sally. And just finally, I'm curious about your thoughts about this. We've heard from lots of firefighters over last year, admittedly a self-selecting group, who were particularly unhappy with the PSU for various reasons. And one thing that came up over and over again is something the Chair alluded to earlier, which is this thing around objectivity and independence. Now, I noticed the Inspectorate earlier said that it wasn't looking for independence because it was still part of the Fire Brigade Union ultimately. The Union Fire Brigade, because there was someone from the Fire Brigade in the PSU. Speaking to some of the firefighters, they think that's not acceptable, because actually it should be entirely independent without any kind of management or anyone from the Fire Brigade on it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you. I do. I don't think that's realistic, and I do think that what I can say, though, is that without fear or favour, anything that comes into the PSU will be dealt with most robustly and objectively and fairly. And that will be our absolute DNA as we take the PSU forward. I don't think it's ever independent, completely independent, for the reasons that the Inspector set out this morning. What I can guarantee, though, is that without fear or favour, as I've already said this morning, anything that comes in, we will not compromise on having the highest standards. So anything that comes in that falls below those standards, there are consequences to that.
Thank you. And is there any work that you're looking to do with firefighters to communicate effectively what you just said to me if they're not watching the Assembly Committee?
Yeah, so no, thank you. So very much, let's not delude ourselves that the HMI said that it's imperative that the next part of the PSU is to build trust and confidence. We must never take that for granted. So part of that is being able to thoughtfully and proportionately share the work of the PSU. So we have got plans to do that. We want to do that. We want to be able to say, look, just as there are consequences yesterday which are really positive when someone's done 30 or 40 years, we celebrate and we congratulate and we give them the respect they deserve. It's also important from my perspective that when one falls below our standards, that we are able to articulate to all of our workforce that if we're going to really look them in the eye and give them the psychological safety they deserve, they need to know that there are consequences to when one falls below our exacting standards, that we will not compromise on.
Thank you. My final question, it might be for you, but it might also be for one of the Deputy Commissioners, is around the PSU meeting its KPIs. Is it now meeting its KPIs? And if not, do we know why not?
So I think I'd like to provide you more information outside of this meeting so that I can give you the sort of quality assurance that you deserve on that. But yes, we are, and we are trying to improve on them in terms of some of the I've seen some frustration this morning around the length of time things take. Sometimes there's a really good reason, by the way, why it takes longer than we'd like to, but we are trying to put measures in place to improve the amount of time spent on particular cases. That's a work in progress. But may I suggest that outside of this meeting, we do provide the committee with an update on the KPIs for the PSU.
Yeah, I can see the Chair nodding, so thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask a question that involves a colleague of mine, Councillor Anthony Fairclough in Merton, who set up a book swap stand at his local station, and then he was interviewed by Newsnight about it because of the big controversy of it being pulled away from stations. Now, goodness me, books are no longer I mean, are they really a fire hazard within TfL and tube stations? Is this something that we need to be worried about?
So thank you for the question. I think it's quite unfortunate the way this has unfolded. By way of background, you've got book sharing facilities from what we're aware at both overground and underground sites, ranging from a small bookcase to 3 bookcases plus. The subsurface regulations came on the back of the King's Cross fire, where 31 people lost their life. And as a result of that, and not just those people who lost their lives, but the impact of many people for years afterwards, as a result of that in the subsurface regulations, they're really clear about you can't have combustible materials on the underground, putting it bluntly. Where we are with that is that TfL, I think, are now doing a risk assessment of all of those sites and where possible to see what risk controls they can put in place. But the challenge is going to be, if you don't manage it, a bookcase can be 2. It can be magazines. It can be something else. So we know that only a few breaths of smoke can kill someone, particularly if you've got vulnerabilities. So we absolutely get why people are going to be feeling really put out about this, you know, because it is another community cohesion tool and things like that. But what we're certainly looking to do is work at pace with TfL so they can actually take a proper stock and do a proper risk assessment of where these things are with control and make sure that you get the right outcome.
Thank you. I mean, I'm glad you answered that question. There's a lot of people who've been contacting me about it and getting upset, but there is a serious issue here that you've highlighted. I'm going to end this meeting now firstly by thanking everybody here, the Assembly members who have supported me. It's not been an easy year for me, and for many reasons, personal and also within the committee. It's been a challenge, and I think without you guys, I wouldn't have, especially you, Susan, thank you so much. People have really pulled together, worked together really hard to make sure that we've done a really good piece of work this year, and I hope that going forward we will continue to do that. It has been such an honour chairing Fire. I'm getting emotional. But it has been, it's such an honour, and working with the LFB and the deputy mayors and all the new members of the here today. I'm so pleased that I've had this opportunity to do this job and this role, and I really want to thank all the secretariat, the people who've been working behind the scenes, everybody here who have put so much effort to make sure that we do the job that we do, which is incredibly important, and I really hope that we are changing lives through the work that we do. So thank you very much for everything. I want to thank the guests for your contributions today. We have got a few short items to conclude. Oh, do you want to say something?
Can I just thank you, Chair, if I can, on behalf of the London Fire Brigade. I'm sure would echo the Deputy Mayor's position as well in terms of your robust check and challenge over. I can't believe it's actually been a year since you took over. I don't know where that year has gone. But there wasn't a glib comment we were making before in terms of we know that we're only where we are as an organisation now is because we are subject to appropriate check and challenge and scrutiny, of which this committee continues to deliver that, and you've delivered that as the chair over the course of the last year. So big thanks from us on behalf of the London Fire Brigade, and look forward to continuing to engage with you moving forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. Don't make me cry. Thank you very much. So we have got a few short items of business before we conclude. Can we note the report and today's discussion? No. Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output from this discussion? And the next meeting, the London Assembly annual meeting due to take place in May 2025, will decide which committees to establish for the 2025-26 Assembly year and a timetable of meetings for those committees. That's going to be an interesting meeting, I think. Looking forward to it. And I have no urgent business. I now declare this meeting closed. Here we go.